Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Annerie, and I am an alcoholic. And I'm from New Jersey, which means I talk fast. I was just recently reminded of that the other day from somebody in New Hampshire. I had to tell them a story 3 times for them to get it. They were like, "You're doing New Jersey speak. Stop it. Slow down." So I apologize. I'm going to do my best not to speak so quickly. Um, but I want to thank Jim and Chris for inviting me to speak today and inviting me to share my experience with Step Six. Judith, I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to jump on at the end and hear your story and your experience with 4 and 5. I actually had a very similar experience to which that I will talk about with respect to Step Six. Um, but if it wasn't for having a sponsor and various sponsors, and now I also have a trainer and a coach who is 32 years sober from, working the big book in Alcoholics Anonymous, um, I wouldn't be here. Um, to fast forward, I assure you that I am an alcoholic. I drank in such a manner that I lost all power, choice, and control when it came to alcohol. My biggest problem with step one when I got here was I had no problem with the concept of powerlessness, but I was like, or I should say, I had no problem with the concept of unmanageability. I was like, nobody talks to me. I've lost every friend I have. I'm talking to people from like first grade when I'm drunk. I only talk to my dad, who's also drunk, and yeah, my life is in shambles. And I got here when I was 19. And when I walked into AA and everybody had gray hair, I was like, "Really? This is where you're putting me?" And then when I heard the word God, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not staying here." And so I spent the next 3 months trying to prove that I didn't need to go to AA, and all I proved was how incredibly powerless I am over that substance. I was drinking morning, noon, and night by myself. I would drink bottles and bottles of Bacardi. I didn't even use a glass at that point. And I would go to an AA meeting because they all said, go to a meeting a day. What was it? Winners, the winners, they go to a meeting every day or something along those lines. I've erased it from my memory because it didn't work for me. Um, but, meeting makers make it. That was it. Meeting makers make it, get to a meeting, and I would drive. I would drive. I got my license taken. So I would bike my way to a meeting. I would sit in a meeting and I would get back on my bike and I would drink on my way home. And I did that every day for 5 months. And when I was finally given the opportunity to go to a residential facility for 28 days and got alcohol out of my system, I was that person who definitely had me over a barrel, as it says in step 2 in the step book. You're telling me my only way out is with a higher power, and that I agree that I can't drink anymore, but I can't go right and I can't go left because I have no higher power and I can't go to alcohol. So now what? And for some reason, especially with COVID and with a bunch of situations that I'm dealing with and people in AA, that jumping off place was very, very real for me when I got here. That it talks about on page 151. I think it's in the big book, or 152. It's in A Vision for You. Not being able to picture my life with alcohol or without. And my first higher power was the fellowship of AA. That's what it tells us. It tells us that, we do have this substitute to not be boring and glum. It's the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the last 23 years sober, every time I lose my conscious contact with God, because I have gone dark. Every time that happens, I go back to the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and experiment my way back into a firmer belief into my higher power. And the reason that I share it that way is because for a long time after I had some sobriety, I thought that if I was having problems or if I didn't really believe, or people would say, God's got this. And I'm like, yeah. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, really? I don't know about this one. I mean, drinking was one thing, but divorce, I don't know. Um, you know, abuse issues from the past, I don't know. So when all of this type of stuff comes up, and whenever I have a different circumstance in life, it's an opportunity for my higher power to get bigger. And the reason that I preface all of this, I do know I'm speaking on step 6, is because in step 6 is where my higher power gets bigger. It doesn't happen before that. I'm not one of those people who believes, and I sponsor, women, and I say, just because you took step 2 and step 3 doesn't mean you're supposed to live, you're not necessarily supposed to have a faith, right? It tells us that we have a faith once we get to step 10, but we have to do the work between 4 and 9 in order to get there. So to me, in step 2, I was willing to believe that there was something greater out there. And that thing greater out there was at least the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. That I could believe in. And I could believe in, by attending the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I could believe in the miracles I saw day to day. Now, what miracles were that? Every time I go dark, the miracles are a butterfly lands on my window. Um, my sister calls me out of the blue to say hello, and I feel loved just for that moment. Because when I go dark into alcoholism, I can't feel anything positive. I get lost in that bitter morass of self pity. I get bogged down by my selfishness, self-centeredness in terms of my thoughts. One of the things that I always like to connect with 4 and 5 and into 6 is that the big book talks about, and Judith just did an excellent job explaining the 4-column inventory and how the freedom can start to come after that. But one of the things that I heard the first few times I went through the steps was that it says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. I heard selfishness, self-centeredness, that's the root of me. It's not what it says. And I think this is especially, I only work with women, so I'm going to say it's especially important for women, but I don't really know. But this incredible self-loathing that comes along with my alcoholism, it's this superiority, the inferiority and superiority complex all at once, right? And the goal is, by the time we get to step 11, is to be a worker among workers. And what that means to me is that I get to walk shoulder to shoulder with people. I am no longer better than you. I am no longer worse than you. Because if I feel better or I feel worse, either way, that's my illness. That's my alcoholism. That's my ego. And I always get reminded that my ego talks to me, or my alcoholism talks to me in a voice that I trust a lot. And it's my voice. That's what I hear. So when I go through steps 4 and 5, as Judith just explained out of the book, I too had that experience. What am I going to write down, having come from a violent household? How is that my fault? Right? Because I hear, what's your part? I hear fault. Just like selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of my troubles, meaning my issues, my problems, not the root of me. That is not who I was born to be. But with this disease of alcoholism that I have to coexist with, that is the root of all of my troubles. I can always get to that. Whether it be I'm taking something too personally, whether it be I have a lack of faith or a lack of gratitude, I'm being dishonest, whatever the character defect that comes in, it will block my sunlight of the spirit. And next thing you know, I hear my voice a lot. And my voice is untreated alcoholism. So that sets us up for step 6. Now, when I got to step 6, the first time I had the experience of, writing on step 4 for months and coming and sitting and doing step 5. And like maybe I was there for, I don't know, 12 hours each day for 2 days in a row. And then my sponsor said to me, "Are you ready to give all of this up?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't I? Like I just described to you how this destroyed my life." She's like, "Great, hit your knees." And we took step 7. And I swiftly moved into steps 8 and 9. And that was a fabulous first experience. And I started working 8 and 9. I finished my amends. I started working 10, 11, and 12. And my sponsor at the time was very big on the principles in the forgotten chapters. So my experience after that was really, it was challenging the next 2 years trying to practice these principles in all my affairs, right? So I got to step 6 again because I'm one of those alcoholics. It's just not my experience. I don't live a perfect life. So I have gone through the steps a number of times, and usually when different life circumstances present themselves and I am off to the races in my head. So I go through the steps another time, and I do it with this incredible woman here in New Jersey. And she exposes me to doing it in such a way that I have never thought of. And this time I sat down and I made a list of character defects. And one of the things that she had me do in this list of character defects was part of my defects was my thought pattern. So, yes, did I have, at this point I'm sober, I don't know, 10 years. So, did I have stealing on there anymore? No, thank you, God. Did I have, purposely character assassinating people in public? No, thank you, God. But did I have incredible self loathing? Yes. Was that a defective character? I was like, I don't know, is it? She goes, well, does it interfere with your ability to be of service to God and your fellows? Yes. Character defect. Do you, other things that came up, dishonesty. I was no longer lying to you, telling me that my name was Stacy and that I lived in LA when my name is Anne Marie and I live in New Jersey. I was no longer lying like that, like I did when I was drinking, but I was lying by omission, or I'm lying saying that I'm stuck in traffic and that's why I'm late. And I'm not stuck in traffic. I stopped for coffee. Um, those little lies. And does that interfere with your ability to be of service to God and your fellows? Yes. Okay, you write it down. And thinking of a character defect as something that interferes with my ability to be of service to God and to my fellows, that's in line with the 7-step prayer because that's basically what I'm asking. I'm asking for God to remove from me what stands in the way of my usefulness to you and those around me. So a character defect was no longer this like horrible thing that, I'm a bad person for having, or I'm a selfish alcoholic, or I'm this, or I'm that. It became much more palatable in my brain where I didn't have to go to this place of being a bad person or a sick alcoholic. I have traits that don't serve me, my God, and my fellow human being. Self loathing being one of them, dishonesty being another, self centeredness being another. But instead of, when I was drinking or shortly into my sobriety, where I would explode on everybody to, because I was offended, my self centeredness had taken the different cloak. And now in my head, I would wall myself off from you because I took what you said personally. It's the same character defect, it just looks different. And when that would happen, I could not open myself to be of service and to God because I experienced my alcoholism in such a way where when I am in untreated alcoholism or when I, and even drinking or not, I get this glass bubble around me. And it's this glass bubble that blocks me off from the rest of the world. I'm here. You can see me. You can talk to me. We can converse with each other. I can see everything that's going on. You think I'm present, but I'm not really present. And I cannot feel any emotion you have for me. And I cannot feel any emotion I have for you. I am completely closed off. So my relationship with my higher power is always experienced when I can experience deep love and service or kindness for other human beings and I can receive that love. So I always just try to describe my, untreated alcoholism is glass up, untreated alcohol or recovered alcoholism, glass down. And it's my character defects after I put down the drink that puts the glass up. It's nothing much more complicated than that. And my character defects are simple shortcomings, but they're shortcomings that I hold on to for dear life to manage my life because I don't know what it's going to be like if I don't. And so once I had this list of character defects by looking at it in such a way where does this trait that I am exhibiting right now interfere with my ability to be of service to God and my fellows? If the answer is yes, it's a character defect. And then one of what started to expand in that character defects was my belief system, because all action is born in thought. So, what did I believe that was also interfering with my ability to be of God and God and service? And The actions that I was taking that would block me as a character defect of my ability to be of service to God and others was in column 4. My belief system was in column 3. And I never been instructed to taking a look at it like that. So, for example, in column 3, if I have as, it affects my personal relationships where, or it affects my sex relations where it's like, well, men, um, I don't know, let me think of one. Men should tell the truth. That may have shown up on my 4th step. Or men should, or the self esteem, I'm not as good as this person, or the self esteem if this person is stupid and I am so much better. These are the thoughts that go through my head that lead to the actions I take in step 4. So if the action, or in column 4, if the actions in column 4 are character defects, well, what is the belief system that is supporting that action? Because I can address my action, but if I still have the same belief, I'm going to do it again. So my character defect list was actually much longer than I expected it to be, especially at like 10 or 12 years sober, because I was looking at my belief system as well and really offering up to God the beliefs that I had, whether it was, I'm not good enough, whether it was, nobody is as smart as me, only alcoholics can have those two things on their character defects, right? Nobody else lives in the incredible dichotomy that we live in. So, um, the thought process of not being, not being pretty enough, the thought process, or the belief system of, women should bow down to men. Well, that belief that I had gotten from my childhood was definitely not serving me in my relationships with men or women. And all of the actions from column 4 were on that list, but that belief fueled those actions. So why wouldn't I put that belief there? Because that belief was interfering with my ability to be of service to God and my fellow human beings. So once I started to understand this and pull off defects from both column 3 and column 4, in taking the list, I then made the opposite list. Now, I always shied away from making the opposite list because I thought that that was supposed to be me, um, self knowledging my way into step 7, right? Or self knowledging my way into what my life should look like. And what my sponsor at that time explained to me was no, 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 no. You're not telling God in terms of what it should look like, but you are taking action in the direction, and you are taking action and offering it up to prayer in order to start to live differently. And then God will do with you what God does. So I said, okay, I'll try it. Because everything in my life that has come into my life because of AA has started from, I'll try it. And as my coach would say to me now, don't take my word for it, experiment your way in. So I basically took this list. I had the list of defects. I had the list of what the belief system looked like with them. And then I just wrote, intellectually speaking, what the opposites of those things were. So self pity, gratitude. And it was what the opposites were to me, because this is my relationship with God at this point, right? I'm not trying to have your relationship with God. So I would sit in prayer and contemplation and say, okay, not good enough. Opposite. I feel enough. Um, I sit in the bitter morass of self pity, not recognizing the good things in my life. Self righteous anger, not putting myself in somebody else's shoes. And this is how it went. And what I would do when I was ready to take, once I was done with the list, was I went over it with my sponsor, and her opposites might be different than my opposites, but that's why I would sit in meditation and allow the spirit to guide me as to what my opposites were. Because to me, it talks a lot about God in the big book. But one of the things that at least a lot of the meetings I've been to is glossed over is that this is not about faith in a higher power. Just like it says in We Agnostics, I have had faith in something the entire time, usually my own reasoning, the whole time. It's gotten me far enough. What alcoholics need to recover is access access to that higher power. Somehow I need to have access to a power greater than myself to live a daily life. Sure, I believe in God, but can I access that God? And that's where 6 and 7 come in. 6 and 7 for me gives me the access. And so I started when I was doing this work with this sponsor, I started kind of culminating all of my past experiences with 6 and 7 and creating this organic experience where I had had experience that, I had said the 7 step prayer and then I could see how what I thought was a defect um was actually an asset or a blessing. And I'll give you one example. During my first marriage, there was this time where, we obviously got divorced, so things weren't going well. But during one of the times that things were not going great, I was very afraid to talk to him. And I would complain and I would say this, but I never opened my mouth. I would try and drop hints. I would do this, I would do that. But okay, fast forward, go through an inventory, realize I need to assert myself. There is nothing more scarier to me in this moment of my lifetime than telling somebody what I need. Don't want to do it, not really excited about it, but I'm willing to give it up to God. My husband and I drive up to Rhode Island for New Year's weekend, I think it was. While we're there at Christmas, he had given me diamond earrings. Now, this man came from no money. He made money at that time, but spent no money ever. So when he gave me diamond earrings, I, even though I'm not a materialistic person, took it as an incredible sign of love and being cherished. Do you think I told him that? Nope. We go to Rhode Island. We're in Rhode Island. We're walking around, and I lose a diamond earring. I am beyond upset. Again, now you could give me a Rolls Royce or a Pathfinder, and I would not really know the difference between the two. I don't shop. I don't have material things. You see, I don't really wear much jewelry. It's just not something that's been me. I lost it. I'm crying. My husband is like, "What's the matter? Like, what's the big deal? We can get you a new one." I'm like, "We can't get a new one. We can't afford a new one." And what ends up blurting out of my mouth was, "Carlos, what you don't understand is that when you gave me that earring, knowing how important money is to you and not spending money is to you, I felt cherished and I felt loved for the first time in like years." I'm like, "It's not the earring. It's what that earring meant to me and symbolized for me." Glass wall went down. I connected with him in a way I hadn't connected with him in years because my character defects were up. Long story short, I ended up finding the earring in a sewer grate down in downtown Providence. So go figure, right? But to me, the character defect was that I was keeping my mouth shut. This happens. I find the earring. Before I find the earring, I open my mouth. The earring came back. So I chalked that up to a real experience of 6 and 7. So when I made this list now, years later, different time of the steps, I'm sitting here saying, you know what? I have experience of thinking horrible things happen and they actually turned out to be amazing things that have happened. So I am willing. I am absolutely willing to give up anything and everything that stands in the way of my usefulness to you, to God and my fellows. And I'm willing to trust because of that one example I just gave you. There were hundreds of them, but I'm willing to trust that God will determine what the character defect is. And God will determine what's useful and what's not. Because part of step 7 is in step 3, we offer ourselves to God. In step 7, I surrender myself. So I've changed my step 7 prayer to say, God, I surrender myself to you. It's not I give all of myself. I just happen to change it because surrender for me just is the white flag going down. I cannot do this. I cannot go any further. So I surrender myself to you, all of it. And the same sponsor said it's the good and the flawed, right? To remind myself that I wasn't born this way to be, you know, self-centered to the extreme, but my troubles from my alcoholism make it that way. But that's not who I am in my core. So I have to do the work of 4 through 9 to get to the core of who God made me to be. And when I can get there, I am a worker among workers. But in saying that 7-step prayer that way, I had to give pause and confront my own agnosticism in the moment. So here I am. I've just done a thorough 4-step, done a thorough 5th step. This is at least the 6th time through the steps in 12 years, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe it's 4. I don't know. But I've had a lot of big book sponsors. I think I do the very best I can in terms of being honest, and I have a happy and joyous free life, except for when things don't go according to my plan. And now I'm supposed to say, I surrender these acts, but also my beliefs in my head and in my heart to say, God, I don't really know what you want from me in this life, but I'm willing to let you take the wheel. So I am surrendering myself to you. So then when I had to say that, it gave me pause and I backed up and created another question for myself because I'm all about questions. And that was, do I really believe that God is going to take all of me? Do I really believe that there is this loving God that's going to take all of me and do with me as he will, and I'm not going to want to kill myself? Do I? I don't know. And so, what I started doing as an exercise in step 6 was I would sit with my list and I would look at the defects and the belief defects. I would look at the action and the, belief actions. And I prayed every day that for the willingness to believe that God really would take all of me. And what I had experienced in 1 through 6 would come up to me. And I would have these, thoughts where I'm like, oh, that's right. My girlfriend and I got into an argument and we got through the argument and we're still friends. All right. That's access to God. Oh, I sat down and wrote down all of these things and I don't want to kill myself and I don't want to kill anybody else. That's access to God. Oh, I made all of these errors in my first marriage and he's still here. Well, that's God. I didn't make any of these things happen. So eventually, after a week or so, it wasn't so much being willing, it wasn't to pray for the willingness to let go of the defects because I could see how those defects were ruining my life and especially my thought life. But what I wasn't sure was I willing to believe that God would really take all of me? And so it was a confrontation of my own agnosticism. And as I confronted that and prayed for the willingness to believe that, I was ready to take step 7. Now, I know I'm not speaking on step 7, so I will try to keep it to step 6. But I have to share this because we talked about the belief system, and that is this, that in taking the 7-step prayer, and this is what this woman taught me at the time, was I would personalize it as to what's going on necessarily in the day. I took step 7, right? I took step 7. I believed that God would take all of me, good and bad. I believed that God would love me enough through it, or I should say, I was willing to believe, and I was experimenting my way into life that way. But what do I do on a day that a character defect comes up? And I'm aware of it. Do I just believe that I'm screaming at somebody because it's useful and just chalk it up to that? Or am I acting as an alcoholic? And who's in the grips of her illness? And which is it? And of course, hindsight's always 2020. A lot of times we only, figure it out after the fact, but we try to do the best in the moment. And what this woman taught me was taking it through the steps, taking the situation through the steps. So I would take a look, and it was a very valuable tool in general. But for 6 and 7, it totally it skyrocketed my program, and I still go back to it all the time. But if I'm about to react on something and I've already taken 6 and 7 and I'm an 8 and 9, or I'm, out living 10, 11, 12, and I'm about to react to something, I pause and I say, I literally quickly go through columns 3 and 4, right? We already know what column 1 and 2 is. Go through column 3 and 4. How is it affecting this? How is it affecting that? How is it affecting that? Identify the beliefs going on. And before I even take action, I'll say the 7-step prayer: God, I surrender myself to you, all of me. Please remove from me every single defect of character, but especially my self loathing and feeling of inferiority, and help me and grant me the courage to grow in a sense of self that feels adequate so that I can be present in this moment to do with you as you will. And then you finish the prayer. But what it does is it puts into the prayer the defect, whether it's the belief or the action. And for me now, with more long term sobriety, it's more the belief. And I then say the opposite so that I can grow in that opposite belief, right? But my self-loathing, the opposite is not I'm the greatest person in the world. The opposite is you know, to feel like I am enough. And I know that in AA, a lot of times, especially when I sponsor newcomers, it's like, I don't care how you feel right now. Let's just talk about what you're doing. But there comes a point in sobriety where my feelings need to match my actions. And the only way to do that is more God. And the only way to do more God is to do this work. And the only way to do this work is to constantly be vigilant about my access to God. And through this work, I gain that access so that I can pause during my day and say, God, please remove my impatience and my belief that my children should be acting better than they are when they are only 2 and 4. And please, God, help me grow with patience and tolerance and the acceptance of who they are with where they're at right now. Grant me strength, dear God, as I go out from here to do that bidding. So these are the conversations I'll have with myself throughout the day if I can identify the defect. The only way, not to just jump right ahead, but the only way to continuously to identify the defect is to stay on top of step 10. Because if my thinking is not in line with the inventory, all of a sudden 6 and 7 get harder. But without 6 and 7, I would be at a standstill in faith. It's only because of 6 and 7 that I get to jump on the road of access to a God. And that's what the big book tells us we need in order to stay sober. So thanks for letting me share.